I found out about the trip the same way I find out about most things now, through pictures that weren't meant for me. It wasn't a call. It wasn't a message framed casually, the way people do when they want credit for remembering you. It wasn't even an accidental mention that could later be excused as oversight. It was a photograph placed carefully online, already curated for an audience that did not include me. My cousin tagged my parents just after sunset. The light in the picture was perfect. That soft, deliberate kind that only happens when someone waits for it. Snow everywhere, thick, clean, untouched in the way snow only ever is in places people travel to, not where they live. A long wooden balcony stretched across the frame, heavy beams dusted white. Someone's arm extended into view, holding a glass of wine, the stem pinched just so. Behind it, a fireplace large enough to step into, flames bright and confident. The caption read "Family Time." I read it once, then again, slower the second time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something else. Took me a moment to notice what wasn't there. No mention of travel plans. No "wish you were here." No vague tag that could later be defended as inclusive intention. There had been no invitation. No text weeks earlier testing the waters. No offhand mention slipped into conversation, the way people do when they want the appearance of openness without the commitment of actually extending it. I told myself it didn't matter. That pictures online were curated illusions. That families were allowed to do things without announcing them. That I didn't need to be everywhere to belong. I might have believed that, if my phone hadn't buzzed an hour later. $8,200. Pending. The number was so precise it felt deliberate. Not rounded. Not approximate. Exact enough to demand attention. I opened the app without urgency, already knowing what I'd find. The charges were stacked neatly, one after another, like they'd been arranged thoughtfully. Merchant names I recognized immediately. The Chalet, listed under a holding company that specialized in exclusive mountain experiences. A luxury spa whose logo I'd seen in magazines left in airport lounges. A ski school advertising private lessons, the kind that promised discretion as much as expertise. All of it charged to the corporate card. My card. The one I'd added to my parents' account years ago. Back when I still believed the word temporary meant something. Back when helping out had been framed as a stopgap, a convenience, a short-term solution that quietly became permanent because no one ever had to say it out loud. I stared at the screen longer than necessary, not because I was confused, because I was letting the shape of it settle, letting the realization take full form instead of rushing to dull it. This wasn't an accident. It was an assumption. I sent one text. I didn't dress it up. I didn't soften it with emojis or qualifiers. I didn't harden it either. No sarcasm. No accusation. Just clarity. "Hey, just saw a pretty large charge on my card. What's going on?" The reply came almost immediately, like it had been waiting in a draft. "We're on vacation. Don't ruin the vibe." That was it. No explanation. No acknowledgement. No awareness that this was information I might reasonably want before my finances were used to fund someone else's experience. Something quiet clicked into place. Not fury. Not hurt. Recognition. I thought about all the times I'd covered something, just this once. The flights booked last minute because it was easier to put it on my card. The deposits I'd fronted because I had the credit limit and the patience. The reimbursements that arrived late, if they arrived at all, usually paired with jokes about how lucky I was to not even notice. I thought about how often my usefulness had substituted for my presence. How I'd been included financially even when I wasn't invited emotionally. How that had become the unspoken arrangement. I was useful, not essential. I put my phone down. I didn't reply. I didn't ask follow-up questions. I didn't escalate. I went to bed. Sleep didn't come easily. Around 2 a.m., I woke up and couldn't get back to sleep. The house was dark, the kind of dark that feels intentional rather than empty. The city outside my window was quiet in that honest way it only ever is at night, stripped of performance and traffic and expectation. I made tea. The kettle sounded louder than it should have. I watched the steam rise and disappear. Then I opened my laptop. I didn't draft a message. I didn't rehearse a speech in my head. I didn't imagine how the conversation would go or how I'd defend myself if challenged. I logged in. The customer service numbers were easy to find. The policies were written clearly, in plain language, stripped of emotion or context. I explained that the charges were unauthorized. I didn't embellish. I didn't explain the family dynamics. I didn't need to. The person on the line didn't ask about relationships. They asked for dates. They asked for confirmation. They asked for verification. That was it. One by one, the transactions reversed direction. The chalet reservation canceled, its confirmation email brief and polite. The spa packages voided, the language clinical, almost soothing. The private lessons released back into availability, as if they'd never been mine to begin with. Each confirmation arrived with a timestamp. Each one used a tone so neutral it felt almost kind. No judgment, no commentary, just process. By the time the sky outside my window began to lighten, pale and tentative, it was done. I closed the laptop. I went back to sleep. When I woke up, my phone was vibrating like it was trying to crawl off the nightstand. Missed calls stacked on the screen. My mom, my dad, an unfamiliar number I assumed belonged to the resort. 31 in total. Notifications layered so tightly they blurred into a single block of urgency. I didn't listen to the voicemails right away. I made coffee. I sat at the table. I noticed the way my shoulders felt, lower than usual. The way my breathing wasn't shallow. The way the room felt unchanged, solid, indifferent to the chaos unfolding somewhere else. Eventually, I read one text. "What did you do?" I waited before replying. Not to strategize. Not to punish anyone with silence. But to make sure I answered from the place that felt settled, not reactive. I removed charges I didn't authorize, I wrote. You said not to ruin the vibe. I assumed that meant I wasn't involved. The calls didn't stop. My mom left a voicemail. Her voice moved unevenly, swinging between panic and accusation. "They're saying we don't have a room," she said, as if I had physically locked a door. "This is embarrassing. You could have talked to us." I deleted it. When I finally answered a call, it was my dad. His voice sounded different, tight, smaller somehow, less practiced. "This puts us in a terrible position," he said. "You didn't have to go nuclear." "I didn't," I said. My voice surprised me with how steady it was. "I opted out." There was a pause. I could hear wind in the background. Maybe the mountain. Maybe someone pacing. Maybe nothing at all. "You've always helped," he said finally. "I've always been charged," I replied. "Those aren't the same thing." He didn't argue. He didn't apologize either. He hung up. Over the next few days, the story shifted. At first, it was a misunderstanding, a technical error, a miscommunication. Then it became an overreaction, a dramatic response to something that could have been handled privately. Then it turned moral, about loyalty, about how family doesn't do this to each other. No one asked why my name hadn't come up until the bill arrived. I didn't correct the narrative. I let it sit where it landed. At work, nothing changed. Emails came in. Meetings happened. Deadlines stayed where they were. No one tried to extract value from me without asking. At home, things felt quieter than I'd expected. Not empty, spacious. I realized how much background noise I'd been carrying for years. Anticipating requests, bracing for the next assumption, mentally accounting for resources that weren't actually spoken for. The corporate card stayed in my wallet, untouched. A week later, my mom texted again. Shorter this time, stripped of urgency. "We need to talk about expectations." I stared at the message. Read it more than once. Not searching for subtext, just letting it register. Then I typed back. "I agree. Mine are different now." She didn't reply. I heard later, through indirect channels, that the trip continued in a reduced form. A smaller place. Fewer extras. No spa. No private lessons. The pictures stopped appearing online. There was no victory moment. No reconciliation. No dramatic standoff or heartfelt apology that resolved everything neatly. just a steady understanding that something structural had changed. Ending exploitation doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like logging in, clicking cancel, and letting systems do what conversations never could. I didn't ruin the vibe. I stopped funding it.